and welcome to Mind Gourmet. My name is Nina Kaiser. I'm the co-founder of Mind Gourmet and, as always, your host today. My today's guest is Canadian chiropractor, internationally renowned speaker, executive coach, and author, Dr. Liz Anderson Peacock. Welcome, Liz. Thank you for being my guest.
Thank you, Nina, for having me.
Oh, I'm so happy about it. And I thought before we dive into our conversation, I'm introducing you a little to our audience.
Perfect.
Liz is internationally recognized in the chiropractic profession for her clinical insights, teaching, and speaking. Outside her profession, she facilitates corporate groups working on transformative team building, motivation, and matching values with vision. She focuses on evoking empowered results that embrace leadership and responsibility over management. As a speaker, her topics range from move to mastery, master change so it does not master you, embracing stress and using it to your advantage, transformational leadership, living to 100, 10 steps towards greater vitality and sanity as we age, and you're never too old for success. Dr. Liz also coaches professionals and executives using the cooperative model and delivers her self-improvement program, Create the Best Version of You, through powerful workshops and retreats geared to enriching your personal and professional life. Yeah.
It's a mouthful.
This is so beautiful. And I think the only little piece that is missing is mentioning how we two met. And then I'm having the first question for you. So it was actually a few months ago in Berlin at a Dr. Joe retreat. And we were both part of the same group. And I remember I have been feeling so drawn to you because I just so much liked you and your unwavering positivity and this feeling like whatever life would possibly throw at you, you would surely manage it. And so I asked you if we could stay in touch. And it was actually only later that I realized what you're doing in your life. And that's when I suggested doing an interview. And here we are.
And here we are. And what a delight to be able to meet you and have some really cool experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Unforgettable ones.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's amazing how you bond with people when you're meditating at 4 a.m. together.
Yeah. And a big part of those workshops is basically about change and being the change you desire to be for your own life. And that's actually the first thing I wanted to start talking with you about, because isn't it like we all know many times in which we so much desire or desired change, either because we wanted to get out of an unpleasant situation or because we were so drawn towards a beautiful potential. But the interesting thing, though, is that when we really start to change, we often run into our own resistance heavily. So why does that happen?
Okay, well, it's a very complex answer, and I'll try to make it as simple as I possibly can. But I think really there's so much that resistance is the awareness of where we are to where we want to be. And all of our lives are built on the dichotomy of measuring one thing in comparison to another. Mm-hmm. So we're receiving feedback. So we receive feedback internally through our gut instinct or a sensation or a feeling that we have. We receive feedback externally by what people say to us, by the results that we're getting in our work or relationships, family, whatever. But everything is based on this one thing compared with something else. So, for example, for me to understand hunger, I need to know being full. For me to understand the sense that, oh my gosh, I need to go to the washroom. What does that mean? For me to recognize hot, heat, I'm going to compare that to some other measure of cold. So the resistance is where we have this differentiation. Now, putting that into the context of what we're really talking about with change, is there's something that is making us uncomfortable, and it could be related to a perception of where we are to where we perceive we should be, where we want to be, where we expect we should be, where we think others expect us to be. There's a lot of things that are rolled into this, but the idea here is the challenge is recognizing, I think, that where we are is no longer working for us or not necessarily where we want to be. And it's usually related to a sensation or a feeling or some feedback that we're receiving from the environment. And so what I like to say is that our habits, and usually by the time we're about 30, most of us run our lives on unconscious behaviors and habits, which let us get through our day. So think of, for example, brushing your teeth. That's a habit by the time we're an adult. But remember back when you were a child learning how to brush your teeth and you kept hitting your gums and scraping the wrong things. And if you don't believe me, then I'm going to ask people to brush their teeth tonight with the opposite hand, and you'll remember how hard it is. And so the idea with creating these patterns is for the body to have basic things under control that we don't have to think about. They're automatic, relegated to unconscious. The problem is that also goes for a lot of our behaviors as well. And we don't necessarily recognize when something isn't always working for us. And when I say behaviors, I also mean our beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And a belief I'm going to define as our current understanding of something, or if you will, it's somewhat of an assumption or an interpretation of an event, whether real or imagined, and we take it to be true. So what happens is sometimes we have things challenge our beliefs, and it could be where I'm supposed to be at a certain time in my life, or where I'm supposed to be in a job, or where I'm supposed to be in a relationship, or what that's supposed to feel like. So we have this resistance where that internal feeling isn't matching what a perception should be. And that kind of serves as an opportunity for us to wake up.
Yeah.
Many of the times in my experience for me was I would push through it, and I would just work harder at it, and I would just put more energy into it, and I would will it, and I would try to control it. And it kept popping up in other ways. And then finally it's like, what am I not seeing here? Mm-hmm. And it was a matter of, this was now an opportunity to make some big changes. So the piece that we're looking at is things that are no longer working for us. And it could be everything, even from lifestyle patterns. It could be changed, like the way we may eat or sleep, or that's what we do. And it's how we identify ourselves. And we have this opportunity to really wake up and change. Now, why is it difficult to change? That's the other question. Mm-hmm. So we see where we want to be. So there's two things that are going on. One is going from the familiar, what we know, to an unknown. And that's very scary for most of us, because we want to somewhat know where we're going to be. And so that often will stop the change. And we think about it all the time. And we try to control how we're going to get there. And the reality is how we're going to get there is actually going to show up for us if we let go of how, and if we can learn to be very, very present. The other difficulty with change is that we have neurological networks that have to unhook from certain patterns or processes to go to and work and fire in new ways. So an analogy I like to give people is, imagine being on a toboggan in the winter, and you're going down its big slope, and you're the first one on the hill. And wherever you go with that toboggan, you can literally steer it any direction you want to go, because you're on this pristine snow. Then you start going down and you do a few tracks down the hill. Then you have a favorite track and you keep going on it, and other people start showing up and they go down the same track. Is it easy or hard to get out of a track that's been well run to get into a new track? And of course the answer is yes, right? Because that pattern on that hill has sort of solidified that run in a certain way. And it's kind of like the same thing with the neural networks, is when neurons are hooked certain ways to fire, and there's groups of them in the brain, we actually have to unhook those and let them go into a new pattern to develop new patterns. So it's a lot like the energy. We have to be conscious, we have to be aware, we have to be diligent, and it takes work because we have to have our mind on making those changes so that we can get from where we are to where we want to be. A lot like that toboggan, you have to use energy and effort to pull yourself out of that run to get into fresh snow or onto a different track. So that's why it's difficult. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand is you don't just wake up and say, oh, today I'm just going to change and change. Now, some people could do that. It's pretty amazing. But most people, they give up just as they're getting started. And because they don't recognize, it's like training it's training your brain to do something very different. And it requires effort, energy, focused attention, being present, and being present when we fall back into the other habit to go, oh, look, I defaulted back to my unconscious self here, and start to recognize when that happens, and that refractory time, try to smooth and make that smaller to where you want to go. I'm not sure. Hopefully that makes some sense.
Oh, it absolutely does. And like following you while you spoke, I was thinking, yeah. And I think the point is often that when we desire change, we actually want to be more of ourselves, which means you want to show up more as your true self. And then that is what triggers those deep fears, like not being lovable, not losing relationships, maybe people calling you not normal or having gone crazy or being a complete failure. And suddenly the change that might be something else gets a real big thing because it influences all our lives and not just one area. But the interesting thing then that I would like to hear your opinion about is this relationship thing in combination with change, and the fact that changing in one area actually is always a change in all our lives.
Oh, totally is. Yes. So I think what happens is that people define other people in a relationship by the experiences that they've had into the present. So when we change and all of a sudden we're different, we're showing up differently. Yeah. Some people don't like that because it reflects on change for them, and or they aren't necessarily ready for change, or there is for whatever reason they have this expectation that you're supposed to be a certain way. Mm-hmm. And they're not necessarily managing that change in reference to who you are or who you wish to be. And so it really says a lot more about them than it does about us. But I know that we spend a lot of, I'm going to say, mental real estate using up this space in our brain, worrying what everybody else thinks. And rather than recognizing that the one person that needs to really be comfortable with themselves is the one that looks back at you in the mirror. Mm-hmm. And, it's making the voice and the vision on the inside stronger than the opinions or the good opinions of other voices from the outside. And the key piece with that is recognizing that there are going to be some relationships that may fall by the wayside because they can't handle change, or they don't want change, or they're going to try to stop you from change. There's going to be maybe some confrontations, but they don't necessarily have to be negative. They can be positive. Mm-hmm. And I think that our culture doesn't necessarily teach people a proactive, empowering, creative way of having good conversations that are sticky points, right? Mm-hmm. So they often come out from a stressed physiology, which does not usually work well for any of us. I think it's us letting go of what other people anticipate us to be having to be like, and really changing frustration into fascination, and looking at things as rather than being critical or critiquing, think of them as being fascinated. That's been my most recent thing, is changing frustration to fascination. And how do we look at our own response and become the observer of self and recognize, whoo, look at that button just got triggered. Interesting. Yeah. That's not what I want to be. Well, how do I want to rewrite that program and that response? And, there's that I can't remember who said the quote, but there's a quote that said, adversity introduces a man to himself, or I'm going to say a woman to herself, or a person to themselves. And I think that when we look at adversity, it is a great opportunity for us to decide, who do we want to be in this moment? What is how is this going to reflect in me being a better version of myself? How do I become more me, or create that muchness, as they would say in Alice in Wonderland? And I think that there is a lot of pressure on people to conform to everybody else and their expectations.
Yeah.
We're supposed to look a certain way and do certain things. Men are supposed to look a certain way and do certain things. People are supposed to have a job that looks like this. That's sort of been a traditional system that I think the walls are starting to break down quite a bit, and need more so, because I think what we need to recognize is that the soul knows no gender, knows no color, knows no creed, knows no job. The soul is the soul. And what does it need to do when it's in this human form to sing in its expression and symphony of life?
Yeah, and I think it's an important component to consider that there are like collective beliefs, not only individual ones, and that we hit them if we go on our individual journey of change. And I think one thing that really helps is just to know that most probably when we embark on a journey of change, this resistance thing is happening. So we're not surprised by it. And that what you said before about from frustration to fascination, and having a close look at what frustrates us, is that the same that I've read on your website, and I found it so interesting that you think perhaps it is how we face the challenges that teaches us the most. Is it that you meant?
Yes, I really think it is how we show up. So there's a number of things I think in facing challenges. One is waking up, deciding how we want to show up. You know, those I think are two really significant pieces. And then the third one is creating the space in our life to allow for change to happen. Because I have found that that's probably been one of my biggest lessons is, if I like to run busy, very busy, and I would say addicted to busy. And for me to add more change, I would just add more things in versus saying, okay, what's really not working for me? And what if I create space to do things in a very different energy? How is that going to show up? And that's been my biggest blessing is to create the space, set the intention, and do the inner work. In my case, it's really the meditation of holding things like the emotions of joy and love and gratitude and wholeness and peace and those kinds of emotions. And then when I'm vibrating in those emotions, how I show up is different. And then everything I see that's related to those vibrations, that energy, shows up where it was there before. I just couldn't see it. You can't see it if you're busy and in stress and frustrated, because that's what you're going to be attracting, more of the same. And also when we get into those heightened emotions, our brain becomes, not only does our heart become more coherent, our brain becomes more coherent, and we actually start working out of our prefrontal cortex, which is the executive functions, which allows us to plan and monitor our emotions and be creative and resourceful and dream. And so we end up really changing our whole physiology as well when we can create space and really become the observer of self. And if every moment of the day is booked, or we're using distractions to make us feel like we're busy, okay, that's another one. I think that we become far more productive when we create some space in our lives to tune in to where are we now and where do we want to go. And again, I'm going to go back to that piece that a lot of people find the unknown is so terrifying, but there are a lot of things in our life that we have this fine tuning correction with. And so if you're driving a car from point A to point B, I'm going to ask your listeners, when your hands are on the steering wheel and you're on a straight road, your hands are still never straight on on the wheel. You're still doing micro corrections in your car. If I'm flying from Toronto to Berlin in a jet, the jet is most of the time off course, but it has an autocorrect that puts the jet back on course. So if you were to pinpoint at a micro level, the jet's doing a lot of these micro corrections. And I don't have to see how I get to Berlin. I just know I'm going to show up there. So what I'm saying is that we don't have to see from point A to point B every step of the way. What we need to know is what's our next step, what's the one that feels the right, the most right, if you will, and take that step. And then when we're in that place, another step will show up. Yep. And so, as I often say, you know, the 100 meters down the road is all I need to see when I'm driving. Well, maybe 300 meters, whatever. And, but beyond that, I don't have to see the whole journey before I get there, because I just know that after 300 meters, another 300 meters will probably show up and I'm going to know what direction I'm on. And if I go off course, well, I stop, I take, you know, stock of where I am and figure out how do I get back on course. But I do it not from that place of fear and stress. I do that from, oh, look where I am now. Let's see where we need to go to get back on course.
And that's actually something that I wanted to ask you too. And that is, sometimes it's hard to distinguish between real intuition, like speaking of our inner GPS, and a very spontaneous, almost like gut feeling reaction of, oh no, this is not my thing. And to discern between the two, like understanding what is really in the guidance and what's maybe just my belief system saying, oh, no, we don't like that. What's your experience with this, and how do you know when to trust this inner voice?
Okay, so that's a loaded question. So for me, what works well for me, and that's how where I'm going to frame it from, is I know that when I start coming from my head, when I come from my ego, my intellect, my rational brain, my thinking brain through my need to be right, need to be heard, definitive answer, absolute. I know that that is not inspiration for sure. For me, and often I'll feel it in the gut, or I'll feel like I'm getting a bit defensive. When it feels naturally right, for me, how it shows up is feeling like my heart and my head are completely in sync and connected. It feels like it's a creative endeavor, if you will. Very, very different feeling. And yeah, there's can be, you know, analytical parts to that you've got to think through. But it comes more from a place of just an inner knowing or an inner wisdom. And then sometimes I would say there's inspiration. And those moments, I find it very difficult to actually describe, because it's almost like something is coming through me. And it's like, again, it's this very heightened awareness of an inner knowing. And you just know that you know that you know, but you don't necessarily have any evidence for it.
Yes.
And so it's a very different feeling. But when they talk about inspiration, we're in spirit. And it's interesting when I watch people's postures, when I see something coming from ego and that position of hard, I'm going to call it hard power, you'll tend to see this sort of interesting posture of where the shoulders come forward and there's a bit of body language of protecting the body or fight and flight in the posturing. The head will come forward. When I see somebody that's inspiration, or they're in spirit or in inspiration or intuition, I see usually this lovely openness and this freedom on this face and this lightness that kind of emits through them. And there's a very different posture. It's more into extension and open. And, you know, when you classically would see that in spirit, you see people going into extension, the head is coming up.
Yeah.
When you see someone that's really into controlling a scenario, you tend to see more of that fighting, fight, flight body posture. So I think that it's this intuitiveness is this combination of heart and head that are in sync in such a beautiful way. And there's this inner knowingness that when you sit and you're really, really quiet with yourself, you just know that you know that you know.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is where you keep thinking about it and you're actively, your mind is working through the process. And I think that to me is the difference between the two.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's something we can practice, right? It's all about being aware and recognizing the differences.
Exactly. So let's take something as simple as yoga. Some people do yoga to force their body into positions, and some people do yoga to be very present with what is so that they can move their energy into whatever direction of where their body needs to be in that moment. There's neither one is wrong. They're just two different reasons why they're necessarily maybe doing the yoga.
Mm-hmm.
And one is very, one is very mentally based. You know, I have to do this posture and this is my goal and I must get at it and force that body to stretch. The other one is, oh, look at where I am today. What do I need to let go of to allow more presence and more flexibility in my life? Because I often look at yoga as just also a great analogy for life. When we're inflexible in yoga, where are we inflexible in life? You know, and so on and so forth. So that might be sort of an example that might be a little bit more relevant for people.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I've been thinking a lot recently, because I don't know, somehow it crosses my path all the time, is the question, what is actually authentic, benevolent, and powerful leadership? In my past experiences, you know, it all comes from hierarchic systems, power, control, but I think there's a whole different kind that I haven't completely grasped yet. So how would you describe it?
Well, to me, the leaders that I have found fascinating, I think the first thing that they do is they build on a foundation of trust. So if you're looking at building a pyramid, the base foundation is on trust. And the idea with that is that when they trust themselves and when they trust their team and when they can motivate their team to trust each other, then we're actually running programs from our prefrontal cortex, which means we can speak our mind and not be judged to be wrong. We can receive feedback. And we know that people have our backs and we take more responsibility then for the work that we do, because now we feel what I say matters, what I do actually matters. And there's not a withhold. So when people see problems, they're actually quite engaged to say, hey, we have a problem here. How are we going to work through this? Versus saying, you have a problem, you figure it out. It's a matter of a we versus an I or a you, which creates separation. So I think that trust is huge because that allows for creativity and resourcefulness to occur. It allows us to monitor our emotions. And the things that does is it helps to support an environment of inclusion while encouraging diversity. And so what I like to say with that is that we want to encourage the creativity, the resourcefulness with personal responsibility, and we want all sorts of diverse opinions and backgrounds, because that gives us a more fulsome sense of what the world is about and perspectives. And we want everybody to feel like their voice is heard and matters. So to me, that is the type of responsible leadership that I'm very attracted to. There are times that difficult decisions need to be made. And I think that a good leader is able to make those decisions with kindness and to do it in a way that is, I'm going to say it loving, in a loving way. I'm not going to be able to communicate what I'm really feeling on that, but they're doing it in a way that the overall impact is going to be more productive than destructive. The traditional hierarchy of top down you do what I say because I'm your boss and this is how it's going to be. I think those models are really breaking down. And there's the difference between forceful leadership versus true power, which is where you empower the people with you so everyone starts to come up at the same time. And really good leaders, I find, build legacies. So they're actually helping other people to learn how to lead, and then they're spinning that out as well. So it's really about having the conversation with people versus talking at or talking to people. And I think that, but the basic foundation in my mind is about trust and then personal responsibility.
So would you say then that if I am my own, company is wrong, but because I want to take it out of a corporate environment, but if I am my own leader, the things that I should really, really focus on is having trust in myself and showing up for my life. Basically, it's the same, right?
Absolutely, because one is a reflection of the other, and what we're doing is we're leading through example. It's a fascinating thing. You look at children, and children can be told certain things, but children learn more by observing behaviors on what you actually do. And so that's the difference. There's what you say and there's what you do, and they have to be married together. They've got to be the same thing. And people that talk about separation between work and family and personal life and whatever, you know what? We try to do that, to try and not necessarily bring home environments into work and things like that. The reality is I bring me into every environment that I go into. So I need to figure out ways that I can be more effective and coherent in that. And so absolutely, it's about teaching through example and leading through example, and also owning our own stuff, right? So when there's been things that I've said or done and I'm like, ooh, that did not come from a really kind place. But then I go back and I'm like, where was I? Oop, I was in an emergency mode there and I was not creative. I defaulted to fight or flight, and wow, look at that. Isn't that interesting? So what led up to that so I don't do it again? And I think that those are the key pieces where we create space in our life to do that inner reflection and look at it. So that allows us to look at where are we and where do we want to go? And we don't want to rehash what went sideways. We want to learn from what went sideways. And more importantly, again, the distinguishing pieces between the two is, where do I want to go? Where would I like to be? And that's what you want to keep focusing on. Not removing the other. It's just, where do you want to keep going?
Yeah. That is the self-correction thing again that we talked about before, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The zigzagging.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if it was a straight line? It'd be great, but yeah, haven't found that one yet.
Me neither. So what do you do with your clients when they enroll in create the best version of you? This sounds so beautiful.
Yeah, it's a great program. I mean, really what it's about, it's a number of modules that it's available to them for 24/7. And to get from module 1 to 2, you have to finish the information. And so it does take a little bit of time, but it's all at your own pace. And it really is about helping you to build a roadmap from point A to point B with ideas of numbers of different steps that you can do to get there. And so a lot of it is about tuning in. Where are you now? Where do you want to be? A lot of it is about being learning to be very present, learning to do some meditation. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And I say that because it took me years to learn how to meditate, because I was so beta brain, so active mind. My idea of meditating was to have a book with me to write my journaling, because all these ideas would come to me when I just created space, but I wasn't meditating. I was just thinking and writing things down. It was so difficult for me. And now I absolutely love it. So we start off with minor, very small levels of meditation. And the idea with it really is about creating a framework on how we see ourselves and getting us out of that sort of stress brain into more of the relaxed brain, if you will, so we can become more creative. Yeah. So it's really quite fun with that. And then looking at when we're frustrated and how do we turn that around, and looking at the inner critic, which is that mind that doesn't shut off, that tells us what we can't do and we're not good enough. I'm too old. I'm too young. I'm too tall. I'm the wrong ethnicity, whatever it might be. How do we turn all of that off and recognize it's noise? It may have been there related to, you know, mothers, fathers, teachers, religions, experiences in our life, whatever it might, interpretations of things that have gone on in our life. And we can start to challenge it, right? It was like, wow, isn't that an interesting belief? Where did that one, well, not where did it come from, but look how that's not letting me get to where I need to go now. And then what do I need to do to go in the direction of where I would prefer? So it's really about building a roadmap, recognizing that there are sometimes detours and times we have to take a break from it, or we get, we have to fill up the tank and get more gas to get there, more fuel. So it's quite fun. It's quite fun. And it is, as I said, it's self-directed. So it works well with a person that is motivated to sit down and do a little bit of work each day, and not necessarily have to have anyone as a coach overlooking them and keeping them accountable that way.
So if people who are watching this would like to work with you like they could do that online course, right?
Yeah.
What else could they do with you or through you? How can they find out more about you? Where can they find you?
Okay, so I'm pretty easy. It's drliz at drliz.ca is my email. drliz.ca is my website, and my website I know needs an update. It's been low priority for me, and we're all good with that. Anyways, also, if people want to follow me on Instagram, I'm on there now, and I'm doing more and more on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I think I'm at my 5,000 now for friends, so I'm now moving it into Best Version of You, which is on Facebook. But Instagram seems to be an interesting way that I'm doing some new things, because of new things in my life that I'm sharing with people on turning frustration to fascination and developing that way. So very happy to assist people if they want. My coaching is very limited in the standpoint of the number of people that I do at a time. I am very, how do I want to say is point A to point B based. So rather than trying to keep people under long-term programs, I like to work on, identifying what are the top 1 to 3 things you want to work on, and let's move that forward. When we get there, then let's figure out if you want something else or not. And my idea is to treat people like baby birds, that you just got to give them the right tools, and then they fly the nest when they're ready to, and off they go, and they don't need you anymore.
This is a very beautiful comparison. And you know what? I love talking with you. And I feel like I'm almost sad that we're almost at the closure of our conversation here. And I don't want to say goodbye before asking you, or without asking you, is there anything important that we actually forgot or didn't talk about in this conversation?
You know what? I think we covered a lot of things, and I think something I would like to leave people listening and viewing this with is recognizing that you are here for some purpose, whether we know it or not. That what you think matters, what you feel matters, what you say matters, and how your being matters. And I believe that we have no idea as to the massive impact that we have on lives that we touch and indirectly touch that we don't even realize. Something as simple as smiling at a person on a street could make a difference in that person's life. So I just really want to acknowledge those that are watching to never underestimate the significance that you have walking in this form at this time.
Thank you for having spent this time with me. I really, really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. It's been a delight, a pleasure. I really love connecting with you, and it's been just so wonderful to meet people such as yourself that are doing the wonderful work that you're doing too. So the thanks is all mine too.
And mine. And thank you for the same thing. I'm so happy we met. And I want to tell everybody who is watching that you'll find all important information about Liz right below this interview. So you're all covered if you want to know more about her. And yeah, I would like to say, like always, goodbye, everybody. And remember to take the driver's seat of the car, which is your life, and create this lifetime to your taste. It's our pleasure here at Mind Gourmet to support you with our food for thought. Bye.